I was lying in bed when I thought I saw movement from the corner of my eye. A soft shifting, like someone sitting up. I turned my head slightly and saw what I thought was my roommate. She appeared to be sitting up in bed, perfectly still, dressed in all white. Welcome to Dark Reddit, your late-night escape into eerie calm. I'm Alex, your voice in the dark and your guide through the unknown. This is Podcast 14, a shadowy chapter in our ever-growing collection of sleepless nights. Tonight's journey spans 1 hour and 3 minutes. A series of chilling tales, whispered into your ears, softly, slowly, designed to help your mind drift while the darkness unfolds around you. Before we begin, find a quiet, comfortable place to rest. Dim the lights, silence your world, and take one slow, steady breath. Now, close your eyes. Every story in tonight's episode is new, uncharted, untold, and unearthed from the darker corners of Reddit. Tales of strangers, shadows, and things that don't always stay in the past. Let your body grow heavy. Let your thoughts drift. You don't need to watch. You only need to listen. You're safe here. Now, let the night begin. Started with a stare. 3 of them, actually. This story is about invisible playmates, innocent truths from the mouths of children, and a ghost who may have just wanted one more push on the swing. Back in high school, I worked part-time at this big gym that was equal parts recreational center and birthday party chaos factory. Think of a massive warehouse full of trampolines, foam pits, and inflatable slides. If a kid could dream it up, we probably had it. Gymnastics classes were held during the week, and on weekends, the place turned into birthday central. Loud music, pizza smells in the air, kids running in every direction. It was exhausting but fun in that adrenaline-fueled, I'm a teenager and I have energy to spare kind of way. But one day, everything got weird. I came in for my shift and immediately noticed one of my coworkers, Sarah, looked really off, pale, shaky, not her usual upbeat self. I joked that she looked like she saw a ghost. She just stared at me and said, "I think I did." Now, Sarah wasn't one to mess around. She was the type to stay calm even when kids were crying or breaking down in sugar-fueled tantrums. So when she pulled me aside and told me what happened during her gymnastics class earlier that afternoon, I listened. She said one of the kids, a quiet little boy around 6, was on the mat doing stretches when he suddenly stopped and started staring up at the ceiling. Not like a quick glance, staring, frozen, eyes wide, like he was watching something the rest of us couldn't see. When she asked him what was wrong, he simply pointed straight above and said, "There's a little boy up there." No hesitation, no fear, just a statement like he was pointing out a balloon stuck in the rafters. She said she got chills, and not the good kind. A few hours later, 2 other coworkers came out of the main gym area looking spooked. These girls were handling open playtime, letting the kids run wild on the inflatables. They had just watched a pair of 5-year-old twins go down the big inflatable slide. As the boys reached the bottom, they both stood up, looked at each other, and then turned their heads up in perfect sync, staring at the same spot on the ceiling. One of the girls asked, "What are you looking at?" One of the twins answered, "The boy up there." The other nodded slowly, eyes still on the ceiling. Neither laughed, neither moved, just staring. By this point, word had started spreading among the staff, and everyone was feeling the vibe shift. The kind of feeling you get when a room is too quiet for no reason, or when you know someone's standing behind you even though you're alone. Still, parties had to go on. I had a birthday group coming in that evening, and I was working the floor with another coworker. We took turns pushing kids on this giant rope swing that hung from the middle of the ceiling, the kind where you strap a kid in and send them soaring across the gym. It was a favorite. One little boy, maybe 4 years old, asked me to push him higher and higher. He was laughing, having a blast. I remember I looked down to adjust the harness, and when I looked back up at him, he wasn't laughing anymore. His face had changed. He was staring directly up at the ceiling, just like the others had. I stopped the swing and asked, "You okay?" And he looked at me, dead serious, and said, "Hey, there's a little boy up there." I felt my stomach drop. Not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. Like he was happy about it. Like the boy was just another kid, another friend, not something to be afraid of. The moment passed. The swing party ended. We cleaned up and tried to laugh it off. But all of us were rattled. Our manager, a skeptical, no-nonsense guy who probably didn't believe in anything he couldn't hold in his hands, caught wind of all the chatter. The next day, between party groups when the gym was empty, he decided to check the security cameras. Just to humor us, he called a few of us into the office where the monitors were. We watched the live feed from the big gym area, and that's when we saw it. The swing, moving, back and forth, rhythmic, smooth, not jerky like if it had been knocked. No one was in the gym. There was no draft, no explanation. The swing just swayed, like someone was using it. We sat there silent, watching it, watching nothing sit on that swing and enjoy the ride. The manager didn't say much, just clicked the monitor off and muttered, "Okay, that's enough of that." I've thought about that day a lot over the years. It's easy to write it off. Kids being imaginative, wind gusts, mechanical quirks. But something about how consistent it all was. The exact same spot on the ceiling, the same age group, the same phrasing. It all just felt too connected to ignore. And then there was the swing that moved only when no one else was there. I don't think whatever it was wanted to scare anyone. In fact, if you ask me, I don't even think it could scare the kids. They seemed peaceful, curious even, like they were seeing someone who just wanted to be part of the fun. I like to imagine that he was a little boy who once loved that gym, maybe even in another time. Maybe he never got his turn on the swing. Maybe he was just waiting patiently for someone to notice him, for someone to say, "Okay, now you go." So we pushed the swing, and when everyone was gone, he finally got his ride. Sometimes the ones we lose aren't truly gone. This story is about love, loss, and the unexplainable ways grief can make the veil between worlds feel just a little thinner. It happened in a quiet moment. You know, the kind of silence that almost hums with its own weight. That kind of quiet always unsettled me a little, even before this happened. But after that day, I never quite sat in a still room the same way again. I was in my late 20s then, dating the woman who would eventually become my wife. We'd been together for a few years, long enough that I was part of the family. Sunday dinners, group vacations, inside jokes with her parents and siblings. They had welcomed me in with open arms, and I cared about them deeply, which is what made that summer so gut-wrenchingly unbearable. Her sister, let's call her Hannah, was abducted one evening while walking to her car after work. The details of what happened to her after that are something I'll never share, and something I wish none of us ever had to know. 6 men, 6 monsters. They took her life, and left an entire family shattered in a way that never fully heals. The police worked fast. I'll give them that. Within weeks, they had all 6 in custody. The trials were long and painful, dredging up every last awful detail and making the family relive it over and over again in front of strangers. But justice was served, if there's even such a thing for something so senseless. 3 months had passed since the funeral when this moment occurred. I remember because it was early fall, that strange time when the air feels like summer during the day but turns cold in the evening, almost like the season can't decide what it wants to be. My girlfriend, let's call her Marissa, was working the evening shift at the hospital. I had the night off and told her I'd swing by her parents' house to wait for her. They lived just a short drive away from the hospital and said I was welcome to hang out there anytime. That house had once been filled with so much warmth. Laughter from the kitchen, movie nights, holiday decorations for every season. But now it was like walking into a place that had forgotten how to breathe. Her parents were out, which I knew beforehand, so it was just me. I let myself in as I had many times before. I said hello out loud, almost out of habit. You know, that casual, "Hey, it's just me," we say when walking into a familiar space. There was no answer, of course. I grabbed a drink from the fridge, then settled into the family room, the one off to the right of the kitchen. I turned on the TV and sank into the couch, half watching some sitcom I'd seen 100 times before, more out of habit than interest. The quiet of that house pressed in on me, even with the noise from the screen. There was this weird stillness, not eerie, just heavy, like the air was too thick. And then it happened, clear as day, right in my right ear, just behind and above my shoulder. A voice. Her voice. Hank. That's what she used to call me. My name's Henry, but she always shortened it. I could hear the exact way she'd say it, that slight upward lilt, the way she always made it sound like a gentle tease. No confusion, no doubt. It was her voice. I froze. My eyes flicked toward the empty space beside me on the couch, the spot I knew it had come from. Of course, no one was there, but I didn't turn away. I just stared at that empty cushion like it owed me answers. I didn't feel afraid. That's the part that always surprises people when I tell them this story. It wasn't like in the movies. No sudden chill, no flickering lights, no sense of dread creeping in. In fact, it was the opposite. It was calm, warm even, almost familiar. I remember whispering, "Hannah?" Even though it felt silly. What would I expect to happen? A reply? A full-body apparition? Nothing happened. Nothing else was said. But I kept my eyes locked on that spot next to me, heart thudding, not in fear but in disbelief. After what felt like 10 minutes but was probably only 1, I finally exhaled and looked away. The TV was still playing, the laugh track echoing in the room like it was mocking me. I turned the volume down, then sat in silence, wondering if maybe I had imagined it. Maybe the grief was getting to all of us. Maybe hearing stories about Hannah from Marissa and her parents had etched her so deeply into my memory that my brain just recreated her. But no, I know what I heard. I know who it was. When Marissa got home later that night, I didn't tell her right away. I wasn't sure how she'd react. But as we sat together, eating leftovers in that same family room, I found myself glancing again and again at that empty seat. Not in fear, in curiosity. It wasn't until a week later that I finally told her. She didn't cry. She didn't call me crazy. She just looked at me and said, she used to sit there all the time when we'd have movie nights. That was her spot. That gave me chills. I asked her if she believed in things like that. People coming back, if only for a moment. She nodded slowly and said, I think when someone's taken from this world too soon, sometimes they need to let the people they love know they're okay. I don't know what I believe anymore. I never considered myself the spiritual type, but I know what I heard, and I know how it made me feel. Not scared, not haunted, connected, like she was just stopping by to say, hey, I see you. I remember. I'm still here. Even now, all these years later, whenever I sit down on a couch and catch myself staring at the empty cushion beside me, I wonder, just for a second, if someone else might be, too. You don't always see it, but sometimes it sees you first. This story is about an old house, a quiet understanding with unseen housemates, and how a once peaceful presence slowly grew darker as the years went on. My first house was built in 1913, the kind of house that creaked even when there was no one walking, the kind that had charm and history stitched into its bones. Arched doorways, a clawfoot tub, original hardwood floors, and this gorgeous built-in china cabinet that sat right in the dining room like a centerpiece of memory. It was also the kind of house that felt like it had a memory of its own. I just moved in and barely had the boxes unpacked when I started noticing things. Little things. Not enough to panic over, but just enough to keep me on my toes. I'd catch movement in the mirror of the china cabinet. Tiny flickers, like someone walking past behind me, though no one was ever there. Always just out of the corner of my eye, but frequent enough that I started glancing over my shoulder more than I cared to admit. I smoked back then. It was my little ritual in the mornings. Wake up, make coffee, light a cigarette, sit in the quiet of the living room before the day really began. One morning, I walked out of my bedroom and saw the ashtray flipped off the end table and shattered on the floor. No windows open, no pets, just me and the house. But here's the strange part. I never felt scared. Startled? Sure. Confused? All the time. But scared? No. It was like the house and I had an agreement. I wouldn't ask questions if it didn't cross a certain line. We coexisted. Over the years, that presence never really left. It just became part of the house. Lights would flicker here and there. Sometimes I'd walk into a room and know someone had just been there, though no one else lived with me. I'd talk to it occasionally, just passing comments like, okay, you can chill with the mirror thing, or, not cool, that was my favorite ashtray. Nothing ever responded. But sometimes, I swear the air felt different after I spoke. Like it was listening. Then came my boyfriend. He moved in after a couple years. He'd listen quietly whenever I brought up the weird stuff, but he never really engaged. He wasn't the superstitious type. More of a logic over ghosts kind of guy. But he also didn't laugh it off the way some people do. He just observed, We got married. Life moved forward. The house remained the same. I spent a lot of time alone there. He traveled for work, often gone days at a time. And in those quiet nights, the house sometimes felt a little too alive. But I'd gotten used to it. It was almost like an old roommate who occasionally messed with the lights and didn't pay rent. Until the tap. I'll never forget that night. I was in the office, my safe space. I had my music on, headphones in, just zoning out playing a game on my computer. It was late, the kind of late where everything feels still and the world outside the windows is just shadow. Suddenly, I felt 3 clear, deliberate taps on my right shoulder. Not light, not playful, just real. Solid. Human. I froze. I didn't even scream at first. I think I was too shocked. Then the adrenaline hit, and I jumped up from the chair so fast it nearly tipped. I spun around, no one, not a single soul. Nothing had fallen, nothing had moved. I even checked the floorboards thinking maybe something had shifted and I just imagined it. But I didn't imagine it. I knew what I felt. I told my husband about it the next day, still rattled. He didn't laugh. He didn't try to reason it away. Instead, he finally admitted something. He'd been seeing things too. Shadows. Shapes moving in the corners of my office. He said he'd sometimes hear footsteps in the hallway when I wasn't home, and once even thought someone whispered his name from the bathroom. It was almost a relief hearing him say it. Like I wasn't crazy. Like I wasn't alone in what I felt. The tapping happened one more time. Same spot, same 3 taps. That second time, I didn't scream. I just turned around and said, "Please don't do that again." I don't know why I said it like that, gentle, respectful. But it worked. That was the last time it touched me. Still, something changed after that. I don't know if it was me or the energy in the house or maybe the house itself. But the peaceful coexistence we once had started to shift. The air didn't feel as warm anymore. The creaks became louder, more abrupt. The shadows lingered longer. The silence no longer felt like rest. It felt like something holding its breath. By the time we were getting ready to move, I wasn't so sad to leave. The love I'd once had for the charm of that old 1913 house had started to feel more like unease. Like maybe whatever had been quietly watching us for years didn't want us to go. Or maybe it did and was making sure we knew it was time. When the house was mostly empty and I came by alone to clean before the new owners arrived, I heard the footsteps my husband had always talked about. Clear, slow, measured. Walking down the hall toward me. I didn't turn around. I just said, "We're leaving now. Thank you for letting us stay." The footsteps stopped. I didn't hear them again. That was the last time I ever went back. Sometimes my husband and I talk about the house, but never for long. He still doesn't have explanations, and I've stopped needing one. Some places just remember. Some places hold onto things we'll never understand. And some spirits, I think, don't know how to let go. I loved that house once. But when I think about it now, I remember how it felt when I left it. Like it was finally watching me. Not with kindness. Not with hate. Just watching. And somehow that was the creepiest part of all. At 2 a.m., the only sound you expect to hear is silence. But sometimes, silence laughs back. This story is about the stillness of water, the echoes of laughter long gone, and one unsettling night at a public pool that made me question everything I thought I knew about being alone. I used to work at a public pool. Not the glamorous lifeguard type gig people often think of, but the quiet, behind-the-scenes job most never notice. My shifts were at night, graveyard shifts, really. I'd come in after the crowds had left, when the building had gone dark, and the only company I had was the rhythmic hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional creak of old pipes cooling off from a day's work. I was responsible for cleaning the building and the pool itself, mopping floors, wiping down benches, checking the chlorine levels, backwashing the filters, all the stuff that kept the place running smoothly by the time kids were splashing around the next morning. It wasn't glamorous, but I liked it. The solitude, the quiet. There was something calming about being alone in such a big space. Until that one night, it was just past 2 a.m. I remember because I always took a quick break around then, usually after finishing the changing rooms. I'd mop and disinfect each stall, refill the soap, toss the lost and found items into the bin, then head out to check the deck and prep the skimmers. That night felt normal at first, a little colder than usual, but not unusual for an old building with sketchy heating. I had my headphones in for most of the shift, just low enough to still hear things around me. That's when I heard it. Laughter, childlike, high-pitched, quick. I paused, took my headphones out, and there it was again, clear as day, the unmistakable sound of bare feet slapping against wet concrete, the quick rhythm of someone running. I stepped out of the changing room and into the corridor leading to the pool deck. My heart was thumping, not out of fear yet, but confusion. The place had been closed for 4 hours by then. All doors were locked. The alarm was set. There shouldn't have been anyone there. Still, I had to check. Instinct kicked in, training protocol. I scanned the entire pool deck. Every inch. Nothing. Not a single person in sight. The water was still unmoving. No ripples, no waves, no disturbance. I stood at the edge and looked around, half expecting a kid to jump out from behind the bleachers or from under a bench. But the silence had returned. Then I looked down. No wet footprints. Nothing. And I swear, that hit harder than seeing someone there would have. If it had been a kid, if someone had broken in, there would be prints, a trail, something. But the deck was pristine, dry, as if the laughter I heard had come from somewhere else entirely, somewhere not of this world. I walked to the security office, my skin prickling with each step. I checked every camera, rewound the last 10 minutes. The footage showed nothing. No doors opening, no motion detected. Just me walking into the changing rooms and then me coming out alone. Still, I double-checked the doors. Every single one of them was locked from the inside. No forced entries. No open windows. No motion triggers. I was absolutely the only person in the building. And yet, that laughter, I heard it. I know I did. Now, I've never really considered myself superstitious. Sure, I've gotten the occasional bad vibe or two from certain places, but I've always chalked it up to being tired or a trick of the light or just being human. But that night, it was different. That wasn't my mind playing tricks on me. That was real. And the worst part? That wasn't the first time someone had mentioned hearing something. I'd brushed it off every other time. A coworker once joked about seeing a kid standing by the diving board after hours, but the kid vanished when they turned on the lights. Someone else refused to go into the mechanical room alone, saying they always felt like they were being watched. I thought it was all just workplace folklore. Tales passed around to make the night shifts feel spookier. But after that night, I stopped laughing at those stories. From then on, Every time I walked through that building alone, I felt like I wasn't really alone. I'd catch whispers of sound in the distance, quick taps, quiet giggles. Sometimes I'd glance at the pool expecting to see the water still, and instead, I'd find the tiniest ripple disturbing its glassy surface, as if someone had just dipped their toe in. It never happened again with the same clarity as that night, but I never stopped feeling it. Eventually, I switched jobs, not because of the pool, not officially anyway, but when a daytime position came up elsewhere, I jumped at the chance. Night shifts stopped feeling peaceful. They became heavy, like the darkness was watching me too closely, like the building itself had secrets it didn't want me to uncover. Years later, I mentioned that night to a former coworker at a get-together. They got quiet, looked at me for a long moment, then said, "You heard it too?" Apparently, over the years, more than a few night shift workers had quit after experiencing things. One even said she heard someone call her name from the deep end, only to find the pool completely empty. No one ever filed reports. What would we even say? "Excuse me, supervisor, the pool has a ghost?" It became this unspoken understanding. Whatever was there, it didn't seem dangerous. Just curious. Lonely, maybe. I've thought about that night often since then. Sometimes I wonder who that child was. If it was a child, did something happen in that building long before I ever set foot inside it? Was it just a trick of the mind, brought on by late hours and fluorescent lights? Or was it something else? Whatever it was, I'll never forget the sound of that laughter. And sometimes, when I'm at a public pool or walking near water late at night, I find myself pausing, listening, just in case it laughs again. It started with laughter, flirtation, and a quiet weekend at home. It ended with a flying angel, a dark figure, and a deep grunt that shook me to the core. This story is about love, loss, and the strange, spine-chilling things that sometimes happen when we think we're alone, but aren't. I was in my early 20s, still in that beautiful, chaotic phase where the world feels full of promise and your biggest concerns revolve around catching every moment you can with the person you're falling for. My girlfriend, Megan, and I had been together for a little over a year at that point. Things were getting serious. I'd gotten to know her family, her quirks, her favorite movies, her go-to coffee order. And I'd started spending more time at her parents' house on weekends when she was home from school. Now, Megan's family was kind and welcoming. Her mom the type to insist you eat more. Her dad soft-spoken and observant. Their house had this warm, lived-in energy. The kind of place with family photos lining the staircase and handmade crafts from kindergarten still stuck on the fridge, even though the youngest kid was in middle school. But there was one thing about their house I never quite got used to. A shelf in the living room. It looked normal enough at first glance. Just a small wooden ledge above the fireplace mantel. But on it sat two things. A heavy, carved angel statue and an urn containing Megan's grandfather's ashes. I didn't know much about her grandfather, only that he had passed away a few years earlier, and from the way everyone spoke of him, he had been a strong, proud man with a commanding presence. The type of man who wasn't afraid to speak his mind, even when he didn't say much at all. Megan once joked he could make a whole room quiet just by raising an eyebrow. Anyway, it was a quiet Saturday afternoon when things got weird. Megan's parents had gone out for the evening. Her little sister was upstairs doing whatever middle schoolers do when they're too young to join in and too old to want to. And we had the living room to ourselves. We were just fooling around on the couch. Nothing too scandalous. Just the kind of playful cuddling and giggling you'd expect from two people who couldn't get enough of each other. The TV was on low in the background, and the room was filled with the golden light of late afternoon. And then it happened. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Fast. Sudden. The angel statue flew off the shelf. Not fell. Not slipped. Flew. It didn't drop straight down like gravity would have demanded. It launched forward, a few feet away from the wall. And in the same moment, just a beat behind, I heard it. A grunt. Deep. Low. Not like a noise from the TV or anything human. More like something guttural, primitive. It sounded like someone had forced out a breath from the depths of their chest. I froze. Megan bolted upright, eyes wide, looking at the spot where the angel now lay shattered on the hardwood floor. We sat there stunned. No words, no movement, just two 20-somethings trying to process what we had both just seen and heard. After what felt like a minute, but was probably only seconds, I finally asked, quietly, "Did you hear that sound?" She looked at me, eyes still wide, and nodded. Yeah, the grunt. That was the moment my stomach dropped. Because if she hadn't heard it, I could have passed it off as my imagination. But she had, and she was just as freaked out as I was. Later that evening, during dinner, we couldn't help but tell her parents. Of course, we left out the romantic context. We just said we were in the living room when it happened. Her dad gave us this long, unreadable look. Her mom gasped and looked over toward the shelf, now empty but for the urn. And that's when Megan's little sister, Anna, burst into tears. She told us, between choked sobs, that for the past few nights, she had seen a shadowy figure standing at the foot of her bed. She hadn't said anything, she admitted, because she thought no one would believe her. She said it didn't move, didn't speak, but it felt heavy, like it was watching her, pressing down on her with just its presence. I swear the room dropped 10 degrees in that moment. Her mom wrapped her in a hug. Megan reached for my hand under the table, and her dad, stoic as ever, just stood up, walked to the living room, and picked up the broken pieces of the angel statue. I remember he looked over his shoulder and said, almost to himself, maybe he didn't like where we put him. That night, I didn't sleep much. Even though nothing else happened, I kept replaying it in my head. The way the statue moved, the sound, the timing of it all. It didn't feel angry exactly, but it didn't feel random either. It felt deliberate, purposeful. I'd always been a skeptic. I still am in a lot of ways, but that day changed something in me. Because no matter how much you rationalize, no matter how much you try to explain it away, some things don't fit into neat little boxes. Some things just are. Megan and I eventually moved on. Life took us in different directions, but I'll never forget her, her family, or that house. And every now and then, when I pass by a shelf holding an urn or an old statue, I pause, just for a moment, and I wonder if I'm truly alone, or if someone is still watching. You know that feeling when something feels a little too perfect? Too polished, too calm, like you're in a dream that doesn't quite add up? That's how it started. and what followed turned a sleepover into a ghost story I'll never forget. This story is about the past refusing to be forgotten, about loyalty, loss, and how sometimes the people we think are long gone might still be walking the same halls as us. My uncle's house is the kind of place that makes you slow down when you drive past it, even if you've never been there before. It sits on a quiet stretch out on the eastern tip of Long Island, surrounded by fields, trees, and that kind of stillness that feels thicker than silence. It's a beautiful house, classic colonial with ivy crawling up the brickwork and those old, wavy glass windows that distort the light just a little. To look at it, you wouldn't think anything strange happened there. But everyone in the family has heard the whispers that the house is haunted, and not in the Halloween decor kind of way. The story goes back to the 1800s. The family who owned it back then had promised the house to their stableman, a loyal man who'd worked there for decades. He wasn't just an employee, he was part of the household. But when the time came, the family sold the property instead, leaving him with nothing. People said he died heartbroken and maybe a little angry. After that, the rumors started. Things moving, voices at night, faces in mirrors. It never felt malicious, just unfinished, like someone was still waiting for a different ending. But it wasn't the stableman that gave me chills. It was the maid. It all happened one spring weekend a few years ago, though I didn't hear the full story until later. My uncle, a brilliant and kind of eccentric neurologist who splits his time between New York City and the countryside, had invited a friend of his and her younger sister to stay the weekend. Nothing big, just a quiet visit, some wine, maybe brunch on Sunday. The usual. That night, the sister, let's call her Rachel, woke up early, around 6 a.m. The house was still, the way big old houses are when everyone's asleep and even the floorboards are holding their breath. But as she opened her eyes, she caught sight of something on the stairs just outside her room. A maid, dressed in a traditional black and white uniform, crisp and tidy. She was carrying a small stack of white towels and walking quietly down the stairs. Rachel blinked, confused for a moment but not alarmed. She assumed it was staff. After all, my uncle was successful, meticulous, and liked things a certain way. It wouldn't be totally out of character for him to have hired someone to help while guests were over. And the woman didn't seem ghostly. She looked as real as anyone. Later that morning, just as Rachel was drifting in and out of sleep, she saw the maid again. This time, the woman was carrying what looked like a percolator. Again, she was descending the stairs in silence, as if she had done this 1,000 times before. By the time Rachel was fully awake and made her way downstairs, she was expecting to smell coffee or hear clattering from the kitchen. But the only sound was my uncle and her sister talking in the living room. "Is the maid making breakfast?" Rachel asked casually. My uncle paused, confused. "What maid?" Rachel explained what she had seen, twice. The details. The uniform, the towels, the percolator, how she seemed so real. My uncle's eyes lit up in that way people do when they've heard this kind of thing before. He didn't say anything at first, just motioned for her to follow him into the living room, where an old photograph hung on the wall. It was sepia-toned and faded at the edges, but the faces were clear, especially one. "That's her," Rachel said, pointing. "That's the woman I saw." My uncle smiled, not unkindly. "Yeah," he said. "She's been dead for about 100 years. I can only imagine what Rachel must have felt in that moment, when your brain has to do a double take, not because of something scary, but because something completely impossible just happened, and you have no explanation. We later learned a bit more about the woman in the photo. She was a maid who had worked in the house for most of her life, known for her precision and quiet presence. Apparently, she ran the household with such grace and order that even guests commented on the way things just worked when she was around. No mess, no fuss, just a calming rhythm to everything. She died sometime around the early 1900s, but clearly, she hadn't left entirely. After that weekend, Rachel swore off staying there again. Her sister, on the other hand, became a little obsessed with the story, digging into old town records, finding fragments of history about the maid and the household. She found out that when the house was sold instead of given to the stableman, several staff members had stayed on under the new owners, including the maid. Maybe that house was her whole life. Maybe she loved it. Maybe she stayed because it was the one place she felt useful, where she had purpose. Maybe she just wanted to make sure everything still ran the way it used to. We don't know. What I do know is that every time I visit my uncle's house, I glance at those stairs, half expecting to see a flash of black and white. And when I pass the photo in the living room, I find myself looking a little longer at her face. She doesn't look haunted. She looks like she's still taking care of things. And maybe she is. Maybe not all ghosts are trapped or angry. Maybe some stay because they simply can't imagine being anywhere else. Or maybe, in some strange way, the house remembers her, and it lets her walk its halls, just like she always did. Quietly, purposefully, and without ever really leaving. It started with the sound of the vacuum, soft, distant, and unmistakably real. But the vacuum wasn't plugged in, and no one was touching it. This story is about the kind of ghost that doesn't scare, but soothes. The kind that doesn't linger with menace, but with a quiet sense of purpose. It's about a woman who spent her whole life taking care of her family, and maybe never stopped. My grandparents' house has always had a sort of stillness to it. Not silence exactly. It creaks, it hums, it breathes, but a kind of calm that seems older than any of us. The house is well over a century old, built in the 1860s, and it wears its age gracefully. Wooden floors that groan politely underfoot, high ceilings with crown molding, windows that let the morning light paint the walls golden. They moved into it in the late 60s, newly married, full of plans, and with no idea they were stepping into a home that already had a caretaker. Or, as we came to think of her, a helper who simply never left. It started subtly. The vacuum cleaner, for example, would occasionally switch on in the other room. No one would be near it, and it wouldn't run long. Just a hum, a pause, and then silence again. My grandma, ever practical, chalked it up to faulty wiring or the switch being bumped. But it always happened in the middle of the night. Always when the house was otherwise still. And then there were the towels. My grandpa would casually mention that he'd dropped a shirt on the floor before bed, only to find it folded neatly at the foot of the bed when he woke up. It became a running joke. The laundry fairy strikes again. But deep down, we all knew it wasn't each other. Over the years, the incidents continued, gentle and helpful. A dish left in the sink would be clean and drying on the rack the next morning. Keys that had gone missing would suddenly appear on the hallway table. Blankets were tucked just a little tighter on cold nights. Nothing scary ever happened. No slamming doors, no whispers in the dark. Just these small, loving gestures, like the kind you'd expect from a family member who simply wanted to make life a little easier. I didn't grow up in the house, but I visited often, and I always felt watched in the kindest way. Not like someone was hovering, but like someone was checking in. When I stayed overnight, I'd catch myself saying goodnight to the empty room, just in case someone was listening. One winter during college, I visited for a week and found myself knee-deep in finals. But naturally, procrastination hit hard, and I found myself going down a rabbit hole of local history. Out of pure curiosity, I searched my grandparents' address in the town's online newspaper archives. I expected to find maybe a property listing or a mention in some community newsletter. What I found was a much richer story. The original family who built the house in the 1860s had a daughter, Eleanor, who had grown up there. She never married, never moved out. Instead, she stayed to care for her father after her mother passed away, running the house, keeping things together, tending the garden, keeping up with the town's events. From the few mentions of her in the local paper, she seemed to have been quietly beloved. Someone who sent notes to the church ladies, who donated food during tough winters, who stitched quilts for school fundraisers. When her father died, she remained in the house, living alone until she passed away herself in the 1940s. No children, no siblings, just a woman who had given her life to the place that had raised her. I remember reading that and sitting back in my chair with goosebumps. Felt so obvious suddenly. Of course she was still there, not out of sorrow or restlessness, but because she had always taken care of people. And what was a house if not a collection of people who needed her? After that, I felt like I understood her presence more, and I talked to her, quietly, respectfully, never demanding. I'd say things like, "Thanks for the help with the laundry," or "Hope we're keeping the place the way you like it," and somehow that made the air feel a little warmer. Years passed. The stories became part of the family lore. Some cousins dismissed it as coincidence or imagination, and that's fine. But most of us knew. You felt it. It was like an invisible hand tidying up behind you, a sense of order settling in without effort. My grandparents grew older. The house aged with them. And through it all, Eleanor, at least that's what we started calling her, remained. When my grandmother was recovering from surgery and couldn't do much around the house, my grandfather swore he felt someone fluff the pillow under her head. He told me, not as a spooky story, but like he was sharing a bit of family gossip. "She still checks in," he said. "She always does. What gets me the most, though, is the kindness of it all. We hear so many ghost stories filled with fear and darkness and cold hands. But this wasn't that. This was a legacy of care. A woman who gave her whole life to keeping her home in order, who kept caring even after time forgot her. Now, every time I visit, I take a moment to say hello. I'll straighten a photo frame or fluff a cushion or fold a stray towel. Not because I have to, but because I feel like it's my way of returning the favor. Like I'm helping her take care of the house we all still love. I don't know what happens after we're gone, but if we do get to stay somewhere, I hope it's somewhere like that. A quiet old house filled with sunlight, good memories, and the soft sound of a vacuum humming at 2 a.m. Just a helpful ghost doing what she's always done, making sure everyone is okay. There are some places where the veil feels thinner, where history breathes down your neck and the walls seem to hum with old stories. This was one of those places. This story is about ancient cities and thin boundaries, about a mysterious white figure hovering near an ornate window, and the strange terror of feeling like you've seen something that wasn't meant for you. Back in 2011, I was studying abroad in Morocco. One of those once-in-a-lifetime experiences you sign up for when you're young and restless and itching to be somewhere that feels vastly different from home. Everything about the country was rich and overwhelming in the best way. The smells of spices curling through the air, the maze-like streets of the Medinas, the constant hum of life pulsing through narrow alleys and open squares. We were staying in a riad in Marrakesh, tucked deep into the Medina. If you've never seen one, a riad is a traditional Moroccan house, usually with an interior courtyard or garden. This one was beautiful, carved with detailing, colorful tiles, tall, arched windows draped with fabric that shimmered in the sun during the day. It felt like something from another century, and honestly, that was part of the charm. I had one roommate, a fellow student I was friendly with, though we weren't especially close. We'd gotten into a rhythm of crashing early most nights, worn out from the sensory overload that Marrakesh generously provides. One night, I had stayed up a little later than usual, scrolling through my camera roll and journaling about the day's adventures. That's when it started. I was lying in bed when I thought I saw movement from the corner of my eye. A soft shifting, like someone sitting up. I turned my head slightly and saw what I thought was my roommate. She appeared to be sitting up in bed, perfectly still, dressed in all white. No sound, no words, just stillness. I assumed she'd woken up suddenly or maybe had a bad dream. But something felt off. Her posture, the way she was sitting, rigid, almost unnatural. I blinked a few times and looked again. She wasn't sitting up anymore. She was fast asleep, turned the other way, clearly undisturbed. I froze. My heart picked up, that sharp, quick flutter of adrenaline that happens when your body realizes before your brain does that something's not quite right. And then I saw it, near the windows, those tall, dreamy windows I'd admired just that morning. Something white and hazy was floating. I don't know how else to describe it. It wasn't just light or shadow. It had form, vaguely shaped like a person, but not solid. It hovered near the ceiling, moving almost like it was swaying gently in some invisible breeze. I stared, frozen. I don't even think I was breathing. It wasn't like in the movies where you scream or run. I just lay there, waiting for it to disappear or become something explainable. But it didn't. It hung there, suspended and silent, as if watching me back. The feeling wasn't exactly evil, I wouldn't say that, but it was wrong. Like I was seeing something that I shouldn't, something that wasn't meant to be seen. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I slipped quietly out of bed, grabbed my phone, and walked as calmly as I could to the bathroom. I turned on the light and shut the door. It was the only thing I could think of: small space, locked door, actual light. I didn't even try to go back to bed. Instead, I climbed into the bathtub, curled up with a towel and my phone, and stayed there. All night. I must have fallen asleep sometime before dawn, but I remember staring at the bathroom ceiling, trying to rationalize what had happened. I've always believed there's something out there, energy, spirits, whatever name you want to give it, but I never thought I'd be that close to it. The next morning, my roommate found me brushing my teeth and looking like a wreck. "Rough night?" she asked, yawning. I told her what I saw. She kind of laughed it off, said she'd slept like a rock and didn't notice anything weird. But as I talked, her expression shifted from playful to mildly uneasy. I asked if she'd maybe sat up in the night, even for a second. She swore she hadn't, and she definitely didn't own anything resembling white night clothes. That part stuck with me. For the rest of the trip, nothing like that happened again. I didn't see the white figure, and I slept as generous, with the bathroom light on most nights. I tried to chalk it up to exhaustion, cultural overload, maybe a waking dream. But deep down, I knew. That moment, the figure, the floating, the stillness, was real in a way that dreams never quite are. When I came home, I did a little digging. Stories of spirits in Marrakesh aren't uncommon, especially in the old Medinas, where hundreds of years of lives have played out in the same walls. The idea of jinn, or spiritual entities, is woven into Moroccan culture. Some are tricksters, some are dangerous, but others, just watchers, drifters, beings that slip through cracks in reality to remind us the world is bigger than we think. Maybe that's what I saw. Or maybe, and this is the part one weirdly find comforting, it was something protective, curious, just a presence that noticed a stranger in its space and decided to float by, quietly, to observe. Maybe it wasn't threatening, just there. Every now and then I think about that night, about how I was a world away from everything I knew, and yet something found me anyway. I wonder if that white figure had watched others before me, sitting by the tall windows and listening to their breathing as they dreamed. I don't know what it was. I probably never will. But I do know this. Some places remember you. And some things, even the ones you can't quite explain, stay with you long after you've flown home. You've made it through the hour. The stories are over now, and the night is quiet again. Let the silence soothe you. Whatever followed you from the tales, leave it here. You're safe. You're calm. And you're already drifting deeper into rest. If you enjoyed these stories, consider subscribing to Dark Reddit for more nightly chills. Until next time, sleep well.